Story 1. The streetlights reflected someone walking behind me, but I was alone. This happened to me in 2019. I was living in a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Portland. It was late fall, the kind of time where the rain never quite stops, only changes tempo. I didn't own a car back then, and my shifts at the bookstore ended around 9 p.m., which meant I usually walked the 20 minutes home through a quiet, residential grid of streets. That particular night, it was raining hard. Not sideways, stormy rain, just a constant, steady downpour that blurred everything more than it should have. I remember zipping up my jacket all the way and tugging my hood low. The streetlights reflected off the wet sidewalk in long, golden streaks. It was the kind of night where you hear everything but can't place anything. My boots made soft, slapping sounds with each step, and that was the first thing that started to feel off. At some point, maybe 10 minutes into the walk, I noticed something strange about the sound of my footsteps. There was a delay, like an echo, but too close, too accurate. It was as if the pavement itself was lagging behind me by a half second. I stopped walking and everything stopped, except it didn't. There was a splash behind me, light, small, but it was there. I turned around. The street was empty, just rain in the glow of the sodium lights. A few parked cars, some trash bins, no one. I told myself it was the rain. That happens, right? Rain distorts sound, bounces it, plays tricks with it. I kept walking, but now I was listening. The streetlights ahead cast long reflections on the wet pavement. My eyes locked onto the one closest to me, the way it shimmered out in both directions. As I passed under it, I saw something move. It looked like someone behind me. Just a flicker, a suggestion in the mirror of the sidewalk. A shape walking in time with mine. I stopped again. Looked behind me. Nothing. I glanced down at the sidewalk. The reflections rippled, but there was only me. I started walking again, just a little faster. It didn't feel like fear. Not yet. Just awareness. Like my senses were out of sync, like the street was answering me a second too late. There's a particular stretch of the road, about 2 blocks from my apartment, where the trees hang low over the street, and the lamplight has that foggy, curtain-like quality. That's when it escalated. I passed under one of those lights, glanced down again. There were 2 shadows walking. One of them was mine, the other was slightly behind, slightly delayed, but they moved almost together. I stopped hard. Only one shadow stopped. The second one, the delayed one, kept walking for another full step, then froze. I turned in a full circle. Still no one. No windows open. No parked cars with engines running. No dogs barking. Just rain and golden light and silence that didn't feel empty. The rest of the way home, I didn't look back. I didn't look down. I just walked, hands in my pockets, counting the seconds between each streetlight like I was trying to hold on to something real. And that echo, that half-second delay in the footsteps, never went away. The next night it rained again. I thought about taking the longer way home, the one with more shops, more occasional foot traffic, but I didn't. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe I didn't want to admit something had gotten under my skin. I told myself I'd imagined it. I even laughed about it at work. But when I reached the streetlight where I first noticed the second shadow, I slowed down. The rain was lighter now, just enough to create a smooth, glistening film on the asphalt. And again, the light bent and stretched across the surface like watercolors bleeding together. I passed under the same street lamp. 2 shadows again. This time I didn't pretend not to see it. I stopped. The second shadow, the one behind me, stopped too, but it was late. It took half a second longer than it should have, like it didn't expect me to stop. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there, trying not to blink. Then without warning, I jumped just 1 step to the side. My reflection jumped instantly. The second one, the shadow behind mine, hesitated, then jumped too, but offbeat. Not a copy, a reaction. It was watching me. I stepped forward. My own shadow moved cleanly. The other paused, then followed. I turned around fast this time, trying to catch it mid-motion, but there was nothing. Again, just my own soaked figure reflected in the sidewalk and the low roar of rain on rooftops. I kept walking, and then I did something stupid. At the last corner before my building, where the pavement flattens out into a smooth concrete slab, I stood dead center in the light. I waited. And then, as sharply as I could, I spun in place and raised my hand, like a sharp salute, sudden and unpredictable. My shadow copied me instantly. The second one took a beat, then raised its hand too. Same motion, but not at the same time. I felt a coldness rise up my spine that had nothing to do with the rain. I didn't wait to see what it would do next. I walked, then ran, then forced myself not to look down the rest of the way. I reached my door with shaking fingers. That night, I blocked off the bottom of my apartment windows with books. I couldn't stand seeing any reflections. I started reading about sound and rain. I'm not sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe some explanation that didn't involve me losing my grip on reality. One article said rain noise masks high-frequency sound and that it can trick the brain into filling in gaps. Another said wet pavement reflects more light, distorting shadows and creating illusions of motion. But neither theory explains what I saw. What followed me home, that night, the third one, was the worst. I remember locking the door behind me, wet hood dripping onto the rug and just standing there, not moving. My apartment was still, too still. I took off my jacket. My boots left soaked prints on the hardwood as I stepped out of them. I always leave them by the door. But when I turned around, something made me stop. There were more footprints than there should have been. 3 distinct sets, all wet, all fresh. Mine, clearly marked in treaded rubber. The second set, smaller, maybe a size down, barefoot. The water stains were irregular, as if whoever made them didn't walk normally. They dragged, and they started right at the threshold, from inside. The third set was different, wider, flat, like someone had been standing in one place for too long. The watermarks from them didn't trail. They just appeared, still and heavy, leading nowhere. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning every darkened corner of the apartment. Nothing moved, no windows were open, no doors ajar. I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight. The second I did, I heard it, the faintest creak from the back hallway. Not loud enough to be certain, just enough to feel it. I didn't call anyone, I didn't take a photo, I didn't even speak. I went into the bathroom, turned on the light, and locked the door behind me. I sat in the tub with the towel wrapped around me and my phone in my lap, just listening. For hours, I didn't hear anything else. Eventually, I must have dozed off. When I woke up, the house was dry again. The prints were gone. Either they evaporated overnight, or they were never there. I never saw the second shadow again after that. But I don't walk home in the rain anymore, even if it's just a drizzle. Even if I'm already outside. I wait. I find shelter. I take the long way. Because I don't know what I saw under those streetlights, but I know it saw me too. And it was waiting, watching, not to scare me, not to hurt me, but to follow me home. Story 2. Every car that passed had the same driver, and he was crying. This happened to me in 2021. I was driving home from a visit to my mother's place in southern Indiana. It was a 4-hour trip, mostly highway. 2 hours in, a thunderstorm started following me. Not the kind with violent bursts and hail. It was steadier. Constant, windshield wiper rain that blurred everything into monotone. The kind that doesn't crash, it murmurs. I was driving alone. My car, a silver Honda Civic, was quiet inside except for the faint rhythm of the wipers and whatever low-volume public radio I had on in the background. I remember thinking how the highway felt disconnected from the rest of the world. Gas stations and exits spaced far apart. Not much lighting, especially in that stretch between Decatur and Bloomington. It was somewhere in there that I saw the first car. A dark blue SUV passed me in the left lane. Nothing unusual, except the driver's face caught my eye. His head was angled slightly toward me as he passed. His eyes were wide, locked on something, and his face was twisted, wet, pale, almost hollow-looking, like he'd been crying for hours. I only saw him for a second, but it stuck. Not just the expression, the way he looked at me. Not startled, not angry, but something else. Like recognition. Like he knew something I didn't. I shook it off. Storm driving makes people weird. Everyone's tired, everyone's wired. 15 minutes later, another car passed me. A grey sedan. Same speed, same angle, same face. The same man. He was crying again. And again, he turned slightly to look at me as he passed. Not a full look, just a slight tilt, like I wasn't the one surprising him. Like I was part of the background. I watched the sedan disappear down the wet road, its taillights bleeding into the mist. I turned the radio off. I kept driving. I kept checking my mirrors. Then another one passed me. Different car. Red pickup. Same man. He looked older now, more tired. His face sunken, wet hair stuck to his forehead. Still crying, still looking. Not at me directly, but through me. I started to panic quietly. You know that feeling when you think something is about to make sense, and then it doesn't? When your brain reaches for logic and your fingers touch static? That's what it felt like. I changed lanes. I slowed down. I told myself I was tired, that my eyes were playing tricks, that maybe I'd seen 3 different men who happened to share features and unfortunate emotions. But deep down, I knew better. Because it wasn't just the face. It was the feeling that I was being watched not by a stranger, but by someone who recognized me. Not from a place of familiarity, from something worse, like a memory I hadn't accessed yet. I took the next exit I saw. The rain was coming down harder now, and I could feel that ache behind my eyes that comes from staring too long at dim road signs. My GPS glitched out for a second as I pulled into a lone gas station just off the highway. It wasn't a chain, one of those independent places that looks like it's barely holding on. Flickering light over the awning. One of the letters in the sign burned out. It was past 11 p.m., but the place looked open. The store lights were on, though the lot was empty. There were 4 pumps. I parked at the second one. Rain pattered against the roof of my car as I sat there for a second, both hands on the wheel, watching the station. Nothing moved inside. No clock, no shelves. Just that flat fluorescence humming through the glass. I stepped out. The air smelled like damp concrete and stale diesel. There was something strange about the pump. Not broken, just used, like someone had been there recently. The pavement under it was soaked in that spattered way that shoes make. You know when someone gets out in the rain, fills up quickly, and rushes back into their car? It leaves a circle, a perimeter of wet footprints that quickly fade. Except I didn't see a car leave, and there was no one else there. The gas station was silent. Even the rain felt quieter. I looked at the pump screen. It was on the main menu. No previous transaction still flashing or timed out. But the receipt was still sticking out of the slot. It was damp, slightly curled from the moisture. I didn't want to touch it, but I did. I pulled it out slowly. There was no gas price, no transaction data, no store ID. Just one line printed across the paper in bold, "Stay in your lane." I stood there, holding the paper, my knuckles white. Something dripped onto my wrist. Rain. Cold. I looked up, and for a second, I saw movement inside the gas station, just the reflection of something behind the window, but the glass didn't reflect me. I stepped back. The receipt in my hand was already starting to dissolve at the edges, like it wasn't meant to last. I dropped it, watched it fold into itself in the puddle. When I turned to get back in the car, I looked at the pump one more time. It was still wet, but now the card reader was blinking red light, as if it had just been used. The screen said, "Processing," but I hadn't swiped anything. I left the pump running, got back into the car and locked the door. My fingers trembled as I put the key in the ignition. The store lights turned off behind me. Just like that, the lot went dark. I didn't fill up. I didn't need to anymore. The tank now read full. I drove for an hour without seeing another car. My headlights cut through mist that seemed thicker than fog, almost like steam. The lines on the road were barely visible in places, but I stayed centered, both hands on the wheel, watching, listening. There were no road signs for miles, no music, just the low hum of tires on wet asphalt and the occasional bump of uneven pavement. My eyes kept drifting to the mirrors. I kept expecting someone to be behind me. A set of headlights, a silhouette, but nothing came until it did. It was a flash, a glimpse in the rear view. Another car, same model as mine, silver Honda Civic. I couldn't see the plate yet. It was too far. I told myself not to panic. Lots of people drive Civics. Coincidences happen. Then it pulled into the left lane and started passing. I didn't look over right away, but I had to. I glanced out the driver's side window as the car came parallel. It was mine. The same dents. The same sticker in the back window. The one I'd been meaning to peel off since college. The license plate, one letter off. Inside was a man. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Eyes swollen, shoulders slumped, hair dripping onto his cheeks. He was crying, and he was driving my car. He turned his head toward me just slightly, not surprised, not aggressive, but with that same look, recognition, and I understood suddenly what it meant. He wasn't trying to scare me. He wasn't warning me. He was remembering me, like I was part of something he'd already lived. The Civic passed and faded into the rain. I pulled off the highway. I sat in a motel parking lot for an hour with the engine running. I never checked in. Eventually, I drove home. Slow, cautious, stopping at every red light even if the road was empty. I parked in my building's garage, climbed the stairs. My car was already there. Same spot, same dents. But the seat was pushed all the way back, and the floor mat was wet. I never figured it out. Maybe it was fatigue, or some kind of dissociative spell brought on by rain, silence, and memory. Maybe it was guilt. I've read about identity recurrence before, visual loops where the brain imprints a face onto multiple surfaces, especially during low stimulus conditions. It's a kind of self-reflection gone wrong, a mirror folding inward. But I wasn't afraid of the man because he was strange. I was afraid because he wasn't. Because in every glance, in every tear-streaked expression, I saw something familiar, not just my face, but my future, like he was trying to remind me of something I hadn't felt yet, like he knew how it ends, and I wasn't supposed to find out. Not yet. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. The bus never stopped for anyone else, but still kept filling up. This happened to me in 2020. During one of those long, wet spring months where it feels like the rain has nowhere else to go. I'd just moved back to the city, Minneapolis, after a few years away. I didn't have a car yet, so I used the city buses to get to and from my new job at the community library. It wasn't a far commute, 20 minutes each way, give or take. I actually liked the ride, gave me a chance to read, listen to the world without participating in it. The bus route I used was the 53 line, known for being mostly empty. It ran a weird diagonal from one suburban loop into the edge of downtown, and there were rarely more than 4 or 5 people on it at a time, especially at night. This started on a Wednesday. It had been raining for 3 days straight. That slow, relentless kind of rain that flattens color and softens the edges of everything. I remember waiting under the covered stop by a shuttered laundromat. The street was quiet, just the hiss of water against pavement. When the bus pulled up, the driver didn't even glance at me, just hit the button and the doors folded open. There were 3 people already on board, 1 near the back, 2 in the middle. I took my usual spot, 2nd row from the front, window seat. I pulled out my book. Didn't look at anyone, didn't want to. But something was off. It's hard to describe. Just density. A sense that there were more bodies in the space than I'd ever felt on that route. I told myself it was because the windows were fogged, and the lights inside made everything feel closer. I read for a bit. The book wasn't good. A few stops passed. The bus didn't slow down. It didn't stop. I didn't think much of it. Maybe no one was waiting. Maybe the driver was skipping stops because of the rain. But when I looked up again, there were more people. Not just a couple, maybe a dozen. They hadn't been there when I boarded. None of them were looking at me. Not one. They sat in perfect silence. No phones, no earbuds, no movement. But they were wet, soaked, like they'd been standing in the rain for hours. Some of their clothes hung heavy, dripping. One man's pant leg was plastered to his ankle like he'd waded through a flooded street. A woman near the back had damp hair stuck to both sides of her neck. Still, no one spoke. No one even made eye contact. I turned back toward the window, tried to ignore it, tried not to count, but I did. Every time the bus turned, I caught new reflections in the window beside me, faces where there hadn't been faces before. They didn't shift or glance or adjust, just stared ahead, blankly. I kept thinking, where did they get on? The bus hadn't stopped once since I boarded, and yet it was filling up, and somehow I could feel it. The fact that they knew I noticed, that they could sense I was counting them, keeping track, that I was pretending not to look. That awareness started to weigh on me. Like gravity, like I was being slowly pulled towards something, even if I didn't move. I told myself to just ask the driver, to walk forward, tap his shoulder, and say something simple like, "Hey, have we stopped yet?" But I didn't move. I just kept glancing around, trying to catch someone else doing something ordinary, coughing, shifting in their seat, wiping a fogged lens, anything to prove they were normal, but no one did. And then, just to test it, I cleared my throat. Loud enough to be heard, no one turned, so I whispered something. "Excuse me?" The man across the aisle didn't react, but the person next to him, a woman in a soaked trench coat, opened her eyes. That's when I realized she hadn't had them open before. And when she did, it wasn't white sclera and dark pupils. It was water, not a metaphor, not glistening, not poetic. Actual rainwater, moving. Her eyes shimmered like a puddle under streetlight. The liquid inside shifted like something was swimming behind it. You could see the way it pooled, the tension of it. Her lids were slick, and small beads dripped from the corners like runoff from a gutter. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. She just stared. Her face was expressionless, not hostile, not welcoming, but aware of me, of what I said, of the fact that I'd acknowledged her. I looked away fast, stared down at my lap, waited. Eventually I glanced back. She'd closed her eyes again. But now the person across the aisle, the man in the button-down shirt that looked more like a soaked paper napkin, was smiling faintly. His eyes were still shut, but the corners of his lips twitched, like he'd heard everything. I pressed the stop request button. Nothing happened, no sound, no light. I pressed it again, harder, still nothing. That's when I looked up at the route display above the windshield. It was blank, not frozen, not glitched, just off, black. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe instinct, maybe fear. But when the bus slowed, finally, at a random cross street near a shuttered diner, I stood up and walked straight to the door. I didn't wait. I didn't ask. The doors hissed open without the driver looking at me, and I stepped off. The rain hit instantly, cold, slicing. It soaked through me in seconds. I turned around to watch the bus pull away, and that's when I noticed the windows. They were gone, not open, not broken, gone, replaced by flat black panels, no glass, no reflection, except I could see something faintly mirrored in the wet side of the bus. A shape, someone still sitting in the second row from the front window seat. Still, head turned slightly toward the pane, looking out, but I was outside, which meant whoever that was, wasn't. The bus turned the corner and vanished into the rain. I stood there, soaked and shaking, trying to piece it together. The stop wasn't mine. It was 6 blocks too early. But I didn't care. I walked the rest of the way home in silence, my soaked shoes leaving prints I didn't want to trace. Later that night, long after I'd dried off, long after the adrenaline drained, I looked up the route online. The 53 line. There was a thread in an old forum, dated years ago, someone describing the same thing, passengers who appear only in heavy rain, no interaction, no conversation, eyes that don't blink, a line that doesn't stop, not unless someone breaks the cycle. They called them liminal riders, echoes of people who commuted until they didn't come back, people who took the bus in storms, people who might have died in silence. The post ended with a warning. If you ever get on a bus and realize no one else is breathing, don't wait for your stop, just get off. If you wait too long, you might become one of them. I never took that route again. I bought a bike 2 weeks later. I still don't ride in the rain.